The first time I ever went to Las Vegas, I was just passing through. I had to go on a cross-country road trip, and Vegas wasn't too far out of the way from where I was starting, so I figured I could spend the first night there to see what it was all about. Although, because I had more important things to get to, I didn't have plans to get super into the experience per se. I also found out that you had to be 20, one to check into all the nice casino hotels, which sucks, because I was only 20. This really limited my options in a lot of ways, including the hotels I was able to book. Honestly, to anyone listening, the tilde to the story is don't go to Vegas if you're not old enough to drink and gamble. There's really nothing else to do anyway. I was traveling with my girlfriend at the time, and when we got there during the day, we went around town and found what we could do to entertain ourselves. Then, for the evening, we walked up and down the strip and gawked it. To be fair, it was pretty fun and a good distraction to the headache of the impromptu flight across the country that we were being forced to undertake through extenuating but irrelevant circumstances. But I digress. The real underbelly of Las Vegas reared its ugly head. We went to turn in for the night. The only place I could find anywhere near the strip that would actually allow me to book a room was this stingy, sketchy, scary motel with, no kidding, a sex shop and a strip club across the street. Walking between my car and the door to my room was a frightful experience on its own. We had a room on the first floor and the guy above us was smoking a cigar on the breezeway, staring dead at us. The whole time we were getting our bags out of my car. Not to mention the door had ample evidence that had been broken into several times. So as soon as my girlfriend and I got in, we jammed it with a rug and a chair and we threw the deadbolt in the latch. We were pretty wired from going to the strip, so we laid up in bed and watched TV for a while. However, an hour or so later is when things start to get disturbing. The guy in the room above us was extremely loud from the very beginning, stomping around and talking really loud on the phone, constantly moving the chairs around and scraping them against the floor, and generally just rummaging through every possible thing that could make noise. At some point, we heard the door open and they started talking to someone on the breezeway. We couldn't really hear what they were saying, but the conversation quickly developed into a dispute, which became a shouting match. Moments later, the door slammed shut and we heard someone screaming. Sounded like a woman screaming, but it sounded more like she was mad than in peril. I was about to call the police, but then the screaming stopped and it seemed as though they were bringing it back down to a discussion of some kind, and I really wanted to mind my business as much as possible. Of course, we kept listening as these two people went back and forth for several minutes. On multiple occasions, something would be thrown across the room. I could tell it was happening because it made an awful sound when the projectiles hit the grounds. Around this time, we were becoming very concerned, and I figured it was a good idea to at least call the front office of the motel, even though I doubted anyone would be working at that hour. Unfortunately, before I even had the time to finish looking up the number, things upstairs got even worse. There was a huge crash, glass shattering, followed by the intense thought of bodies hitting the floor. The level of detail of what we could hear was astonishing. It was like I could see each and everything that was happening in the fight that was going on. They were both on the floor, struggling to overpower one another. One of them was grunting and yelling at the other, one to shut up while the woman was screaming bloody murder. We can even hear the thoughts of them hitting each other right away. I abandoned calling the office and I went straight to 911. I reported the active situation to the police, and when I told them the address, they seemed to already know what was happening. They even scolded me a bit and said that I should have called sooner. And honestly, I think they were right. Minutes later, a number of cop cars swarmed the parking lot right in front of my door. My girlfriend and I hid in the bathroom in the back of the motel room in case there was a shootout. The aggressor upstairs noticed the sirens and flashing lights and tried to run away, followed by a whole lot of screaming and shouting by the police. Then, suddenly silence. A little while later, ambulance sirens. Luckily, there was no shots fired. I didn't actually see what happened. But when the cops came knocking on my door to get my statement, I was able to ask them afterwards. Apparently, the man we saw in the room above us had ordered to prostitute, but then he didn't have the sufficient funds to pay for the service, so he ended up attempting to rape the woman instead. I didn't ask how far things progressed. I didn't even want to know. I definitely regret not calling sooner, but then again, if I had, he might have found a way to wheeze a lot of getting charged with anything. As it turned out, when he tried to run, he got tased while going down the stairs on the far side of the breezeway. He seized up and fell down a dozen or so steps and finally cracked his skull open on the pavement. From what I know about the guy, his actions, and his general vibe alone, I bet he deserved that even before doing what he did that night. My parents have owned a tavern/restaurant for 14 years in a relatively small town. My father is someone who likes to start new projects and is a well-known person in our town. One day, he was contacted by the local realtor to offer my father a private showing of a historical hotel that had been up for sale. This hotel has been around for decades and went from hotel to restaurant to bar with little success. Everyone who had owned it before put it back on the market within a year. The bank had the title now, and the realtors told my father if you don't buy it and fix it up, they plan on ripping it down. A lot of people in the town thought the only person who could save it was my father, so he bought the hotel. My parents kept the downstairs bar and renovated the upstairs for apartments. That is when odd things started to happen. My father would come home almost every night with the camera footage to show my mom and I. The footage always showed an empty pool room with small random orbs floating in the foreground. My father is a believer in the paranormal, but my mother is not, so her and I both chalked it up to bugs and dust. Although I will agree, the way the orbs zigzagged around the room was weird. It still seemed like nothing. A month goes by and my father comes home early on a Sunday from working down at the hotel. He walked in the house, spooked, something my father rarely is. He detailed out how he was behind the bar, checking on receipts from the night before, when he heard footsteps approaching from the hallway entrance. We don't open on Sunday, but if someone my dad knew saw his truck in the parking lot, they would just walk in to see him, so he didn't find the footsteps odd at all. Without looking up from his receipts, he called out, "We aren't open, but give me a second." He heard the footsteps into the bar room and take 6 more steps toward him before stopping, taking another second to finish going over last night's shift. He looks up and peers around the wooden support beam, and there is no one there. He said he got out of there so fast he doesn't even remember locking the door behind him. My mom obviously thinks he is crazy, but I am freaked. That place had always given me the creeps, but my father confirming my fears made me never step foot in that building again. 2 days ago, my mom had an experience there that sent her out the door faster than my dad. She was in the bar room before opening hours, collecting the shift money from the night before. She wasn't in there for more than 5 minutes before she started to hear the faint sound of music coming from the entrance hallway. She said she ignored it for a while, assuming it was one of the tenants upstairs. After collecting the money, she went to leave and the music started getting louder. She said it sounded like old waltz music, piano-based, and it sounded clear as day the furthest she walked down the hall toward the bathrooms. The more prominent the noise became as she stepped in front of the women's restroom. She said it sounded like someone was in there playing the music on their phone. By this time, my mom was sufficiently freaked out and ran out of rational reasoning behind what it could be. Just as she was about to open the door, she said she heard the water turn on and off twice before running out of the building in the parking lot. She called my dad to come down, certain someone had been in there with her, but when he came down to check it out, no one was there. Now, my mom is a believer, and we are both properly terrified of that old creepy building. Hotel burnt down last week. Cuz has been undetermined. On the day we arrived, my mom told me to do just that while she checked us in and received our room card. So my brother and I sat down on a couch in the lobby and relaxed a little bit. While we were sitting, a man in about his mid-40s walked into the hotel. The couch was facing the hotel doors, so I got a good look at him. I remember that he was very average looking. Describing his features in detail could generate several different images. The guy comes in and sits on the couch opposite ours. I didn't think anything of it until I realized that he didn't go up to the counter first. He just came in and sat down. It made me feel a little uncomfortable. Maybe I was being a bit paranoid, but I thought he might have followed us in. Thankfully, my mom called us over and told us that her room was ready. We left the lobby and went to our room. Shortly afterwards, we left the hotel to go meet family. I forgot about the man for the rest of the day. We returned at about 7. Zero and my mom told us that we could go swimming in the hotel pool. We all went to our room, changed, and went to the pool. A few minutes after we got into the water, the same man from before walked in and sat down. He was wearing jeans and the sweater, so he definitely wasn't going swimming again. We didn't think much of it until I could see that my mom was visibly worried. She pointed him out to me, and she said that if he didn't leave within 5 minutes, we needed to go back to our rooms. 5 minutes passed and he was still there. So we got our things and left. By then, it was close to 8. 0 o'clock. We had brought a rented movie to watch, so we planned to watch that and go straight to bed. I noticed that my mom was a little on edge because of the man who'd been watching us, and I got a little more worried myself too. Halfway through the movie, my mom got up to get into the shower. While she was in there, someone knocked on the door and said housekeeping. I thought it was weird that the cleaning staff would come this late, but we needed another towel, so I answered the door. I wish I hadn't been so stupid. It was the same creepy man. He gave me a smile and a little wave. I just stood there kind of motionless. My mind automatically went to the worst possible situation: kidnapping, rape, torture, etc. I heard the water in the shower turn off. He stood there as well for a moment, and then he spoke. "How was your swim at that moment?" My mom came out of the shower, saw the man at the door, pulled me back, and slammed the door. She locked it. Then she called the front desk from our hotel phone to report the guy. I told her to just call the police, but she didn't listen. She then requested we switch rooms. I then heard footsteps stomping down the hallway, away from our room. Thankfully, if the guy had left after that, we switched hotel rooms and didn't see the guy again during our stay.